Hi, I'm Doug from Dynamic Computing, and this is episode 176 of 10-Minute Amiga Retrocast. And I bet you can't guess what we're going to cover today. There's a clue. Yep, good old CDTV. I've done several episodes on it, and I will link to those both in the description, and I'll try to put some links right up there to my couple of episodes on it. First one was an introduction to it and how I got it working. Second one was doing some cool upgrades to it, which included adding 8 megabytes of fast memory, adding a SCSI controller, adding a USB adding a standard joystick port and mouse port to the CDTV. Absolutely love it. Use it quite a bit. Use it mostly for listening to music, occasionally just goofing around with. But is that all that we can do with the amazing CDTV? Absolutely not. Now, the CDTV was really designed to be a 68,000 base machine with Workbench 1.3. It came out right at the cusp, right before 2.0 came out, but not quite in time, so it's a 1.3 machine. And in the past, it's been difficult to upgrade it to 2.x or 3.x. There were some special ROMs created that allowed you to upgrade to 2.x and 3.x, but those ROMs in general would disable most of the CDTV features, which that's what we have it for, so it can be a CDTV. Might as well just have an Amiga 500 with a regular CD player if we don't want the extra CDTV magic. Well, in the Amiga community, that's just not going to cut it. So a new ROM was created. This is version 2.35 of the custom CDTV ROMs that add some really cool features, and we're going to go in depth into those features in a few minutes. But one of the features that it does is it allows you to then use a 68020 or 68030 accelerator and have it function properly. So look what I have. Our friends at Amigastore.eu, I'll put a link in the description, have provided me with one of Stephen Leary's awesome TerribleFire 536 accelerators. Now all the TerribleFire stuff, cheap and cheerful. You know, you don't have every feature in the entire universe, but they're also designed to be inexpensive. This one adds a 50 megahertz 68030, no FPU, and no ability to add an FPU to this one. It includes a fast IDE interface, and it includes 64 megabytes of RAM, which should really make the CDTV fly. And with the new ROMs, this little guy, in theory, should work. And we're going to try it out today and install it, see what happens. Let's take a quick look inside the CDTV as it is right now, just to get just to see where we're starting from here. Come on. Here's my CDTV with its bare naked insides exposed. And I want to show the upgrades that have already been attached to it. I won't go into detail about them because I've already done videos about them, but just so you know, right here, this adds a standard joystick port and mouse port to the CDTV. That's something that was sorely lacking, was the standard 9-pin ports. You can see there's little connectors flopping around in the back there. Now, one of these days, I'm going to make those neat and clean and come out of the case nicely, but not today. Here we have the standard 1.0 CDTV ROMs that are going to be upgraded today to the 2.3 ROMs. Over here, we have an 8 megabyte RAM expansion that brings this to the maximum RAM that the CDTV can handle with its fancy pants 68,000 CPU of 8 megs of fast and 1 meg of chip. Now this goes into this little underused expansion socket over here on the right. I'm going to keep this in here. This should work fine with the 64 megs of RAM in the TerribleFire. I can't see why the two would conflict. The 32-bit RAM on the TerribleFire will have a higher priority, so this will actually rarely get used, but, you know, why not? Let's just leave it in there and see what happens. And back behind here, I have a SCSI interface installed on here that adds reasonable SCSI, external SCSI connector to the CDTV, and that's what it's been booting from for about the past year or so. Now, I'm going to leave the SCSI in here even though I'm going to be using the accelerated IDE that I'm going to put in the TerribleFire, which is going to rest right here. I think the two of them will live together in harmony. If they don't, there's a switch on the back that turns the external SCSI off, and I just won't, I won't use it. But I think the two of them will live in harmony, because after all, this is an Amiga, and Amigas are awesome. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the ROMs. The Amiga CDTV had a couple of different ROMs available for it. Version 1.0, which is what's in here, which is what shipped with the unit. And then over the years, somebody came out with version 2.3 and a version 2.7 that introduced a lot of incompatibilities to the CDTV, which made it kind of yucky. But our good friend, Miho Softic, and his website is cdtvland.com. It's a cool website. A couple of years ago, he took it upon himself to fix all these ucky little bugs in the 2.3 ROM and make everything work. So this is what he did. He added support for 68030s, which is fantastic. That's all you need for something like this. You don't necessarily need an 060 in here. He added support for 32-bit fast RAM, which is important. He fixed an issue with memory card access. In the CDTV, there's a not very often used slot. It looks like a little PCMCA card that can fit in there. That can store game save states and things like that. Again, it wasn't used very much, but it existed, and some of the other ROM upgrades had disabled that or broken that so that it didn't work well. He fixed all that. The other important thing is he added a feature to allow the CD to auto boot even if the Commodore CDTV.tm file is not on the disk. Now that little file contained just a little bit of code and a little logo to verify that it was a Commodore approved CD. But with this new ROM, you can actually boot to a CD and create a bootable CD that auto boots even without this file, which makes it much easier to create new programs and new games that auto boot if you don't have to include this copyrighted file. A+ for that. And when some of the old ROMs came out, you could no longer boot to the really cool CDTV splash screen. Here's a screensaver for the splash screen. But the Jim Sachs logo splash screen never showed up anymore. And that's one of the cool things about it, is having that splash screen. So now you can actually boot and access that splash screen on startup. How do you get these ROMs? Well, we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but let's go ahead and try the upgrade. These are the new 2.35 ROMs that I have. Now, I had a friend burn these for me. These are not something that you can just go and purchase because they do contain custom and still copyrighted CDTV code. So the rule is, if you own a copy of these ROMs, you combine the ROM information file from these ROMs with a new update, and you can burn these. Now, there are people who will help you do it. All you have to do is prove that you own the CDTV, and they'll help you do it. They're not hard to find, but I don't want to get in trouble with my friend Mike for spreading information or spreading contact information about how to land these custom ROMs. But anyone with a ROM burner can do it, and I will link to the GitHub where you can download the actual ROM files. I'm going to go ahead and pop out these ROM chips first, put these in, make sure it still boots with these in before we add on the other upgrades. I'm using a little plastic spudger to get underneath the ROMs and gently pry and twist them up. You can use a flat-bladed screwdriver, but you always have a chance then of scratching some of the traces underneath. Use a plastic spudger. You're going to have a less of a chance of damaging anything. Just be gentle, work slowly and methodically, pry it up from either side, and you'll be just fine. Let's go ahead and set these ROMs aside. And we have our two new ROMs here, labeled U35 and U34, and they go into the appropriate sockets. Let's just swap those around. Make sure, of course, you line up the little notches with the notches on the main board, so you're putting them in the right direction. And here it looks like we have U34 and U35 plugged in the correct way. Both of the chips are nice and tight in there. I'm going to boot her up and see if she still boots and recognizes the two new custom ROMs. We'll start there. We'll apply power to the CDTV. Little orange light comes on, which is nice. And we'll see what comes up on the screen. Well, looky there. The CDTV logo. And look down here in the corner. It says CDTV 2.35. These ROMs burn just fine. Looks fantastic so far. And everything's looks completely identical here. Nothing's changed in the setup screen. That's kind of cool. Step 1 complete. Now this little guy right here should be our standard Kickstart 1.3 ROM. Now absolutely I could continue to use this with the 1.3 ROM, put in the TerribleFire and use the TerribleFire with Workbench 1.3. But I'm a little spoiled and I really like Workbench 3.2 and above. I really like it. So I'm going to pop out this chip next, and then we're going to put in an official Kickstart 3.2 ROM. This one also from, I think I got this from Amigastore.eu. Could have got it from somewhere else. And again, we've successfully removed a chip. No problem at all. Time to put in the Kickstart 1.3 chip. Let's find where the little notchy doodle is. Notchy doodle is on the right. Looks like we've got our Kickstart 3.2 ROM installed in here now. As we did before, let's try booting it up and see if it starts on fire. So an interesting observation here. Boots up to the CDTV logo screen just fine once I got the ROM installed. But when I put a CD in, it's not switching over to the CD screen. I'm going to try it again. I powered it off again. I'm reinserting a nice CD. Let's see if it switches now. It's reading the CD, and it should switch right over to the playback screen. And strangely, once the CD's in there, I can't switch over to the configuration screen again. This isn't right. We're going to do a reset, see if it'll boot to it directly, and we get a black screen. Something's not right here. I'm going to take a closer look, and I'll be right back. So here's where we are. Once I put the ROM in, the two new ROMs, it will not start into CD playback mode. If I put a CD in there and start the unit, it just gives me a black screen. If I start the unit without a CDTV or a CD in there, the CDTV logo comes up fine. I put a disc in, nothing. Okay, so it's one of three things. It's either the Kickstart 3.2 ROM that I have that's causing the issue. It's the 2.35 ROMs I got for the CDTV are funky, or maybe it's having a problem with the memory on the board. I've got 8 megabytes of RAM on here. So I'm going to start with taking the RAM out, and I'm going to see if that makes any difference. And then I'll fall back to taking out the 3.2 ROM and see if it works properly after that. Give me a second, I'll be right back. Now isn't that curious? I went in and I took out the nice 8 megabyte RAM expansion card that goes into the special expansion slot on the CDTV. I'll show you where that is in a second. And took it out, CD booted up just fine. Maybe it's not compatible with this little guy. I'll see if I can figure this one out. And of course, I take the 8 megabyte chip out, boot it up, boots just fine. So before I do anything else, I put the 8 megabyte expansion back in, and it boots just fine. Why? Because Amiga. Who knows? But it seems to recognize it now. Maybe when I was modifying things and fiddling around, maybe I jostled that 8 megabyte chip just enough where it popped just a little bit out of the socket. Hard to say, but it's working now, so I don't know. So it works with the memory expansion in there. Once I took it out and reseated it, I'm fine with that. I mean, I must have just loosened it up. It works with the 3.2 ROM, works with the new ROMs. Now I've taken out the 68,000 CPU, and we're going to go ahead and put in the TerribleFire. Now, the TerribleFires from Amigastore do ship with a CPU relocator, so you can put this on. Let's see, it goes this way, and then it relocates the board over here. But I took some measurements, and I don't think I'm going to need this, so I'll just save this for another project. Pop out the lovely TerribleFire right here. Take off the little protective booty on the bottom. And we're going to carefully seat it in. And I think in theory, it should just fit in. So it's hitting this big old resistor capacitometer right here, and it's hitting this power connector right here. So it looks like we may have to go with the CPU relocator. Let's try and see how it works with that. What I've done in the past is if I have something that goes into the 68,000 socket and it just hits something here, I just use these little, another socket right here, stick it right on top. It works as a little riser, rises it up just a couple, 1 or 2 centimeters high enough to clear things. But we'll see if this relocator works okay. Yeah, even the relocator is hitting the ROM and it's not making clearance. We're going to have to come up with another solution. Okay, so here I have the official Extend a 68,000-ater 3000, which is basically just a couple of ROM sockets stacked on top of each other. I use this one in my vampirized checkmate case with my Amiga 500. I don't have any more of these. I need to get some more, so I just stole those for this project. But that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and just put those right on here and see if that gives us the height we need to clear those ROM chips and such. So if you look here, now I just have a little extension on here, brings a little height to the TerribleFire, and we're going to see if that's enough height to clear things now. And it looks like it's just enough height to clear everything. It's still sitting on top of this power connector, but it is right nice and tight there. Now, will we have enough clearance over here to put our RAM board back on? We're going to check that now and see. Not quite. The edge of the RAM board is just hitting the TerribleFire too much. I think if I played around with it, I might be able to get it in there. I might have to put the RAM board in first, but it's not the end of the world because I'll have 64 megs of fast RAM on here, 32-bit fast RAM. It's not going to be the end of the world if I can't use this RAM board. And another option is I just use my little extension trick here and use the relocator board to move the board over, what is that, like 90 degrees or something like that, and then there may be enough clearance. I'll see if it's worth it. But for now, we have the TerribleFire in there, all my ROM chips in there. Let's just see if it boots before we try to put a hard drive in here. All right, we're going to power it up with no CD-ROM in there. Got a power light. We don't have any smoke. This is good. We're going to see if we get a CDTV logo here now. And looky there, we get a CDTV logo. So it is definitely recognizing the TerribleFire. It's definitely at least trying to start here. Let's put the CD in, see if it recognizes the CD. Should switch over. And it does. Look at that. Absolutely perfect. And due to my complete and utter inability to leave well enough alone, I took off one layer of the extender and put on the CPU relocator. Now, I do worry it's going to make it too tall to fit the case top on, and I'll have to address that. But this does now give me room to put on my extra 8 megs of RAM, and we're going to see if everybody plays together nicely. Put that in there. See, now I got plenty of room there. And now let's see if the TerribleFire fits in, or we'll see if I've just wasted a huge amount of time. And yes, I now have serious concerns about the case top fitting on top of here, and that I think it probably won't. But let's see what happens. And we'll power up. See if she explodes. We've got power, got noises, and do we have a video display? No, we do not have a video display. Let's see what's going on. And I take out the 8 megabyte module and it works fine. So it looks like one way or the other, I'm not going to use this module. I've got good news and bad news about this project. The good news is I've got my IDE to compact flash adapter. It's a relatively low profile one. Got that hooked up here. I'm using, it says A1200 on it because this used to be on my Amiga 1200, but I've got Workbench 3.2.2.1 right on here, and that's all working great, but I think it's going to be too high to close the lid. There is no way that this little guy is going to close, put the black lid on here with this thing sticking up right here. With just the TerribleFire, maybe. So one option is I just use the onboard SCSI to boot from and leave the IDE header off, or I find a solution that's somehow a lower profile or moved off, something like that. I'll have to see what other people have done in order to close the lid on their CDTVs. But the good news is it boots properly. Now let me show you a few things about that. When I power her up, what's going to happen is it's going to initially boot up to the CDTV screen, which is right here. Hey, oh, I have a CD in there. All right, so if you have a CD in there, it's going to boot to the audio CD, which is exactly what we want. Now let's pop the audio CD out, and we're going to do a little reset. If you have no CD in here, what's it going to do? It's going to initially show you the CDTV splash screen, which is what some of the older ROMs did not do. Now that splash screen stays on there for a few seconds, waiting for you to hit a button. If you hit a button, you get to go into the settings of the CDTV. Now, she's starting to boot right here. As you know, oftentimes Amigas, when they're running set patch, will reboot the Amiga once, and this one has just rebooted the Amiga again, and then it will show the splash screen one more time before it boots into Amiga OS 3.2. This delays boot up substantially. This is probably delaying the boot up by a good 10, 15, 20 seconds. Not the end of the world, but it certainly is something to consider. And we've booted up to a lovely Amiga OS 3.2 screen. And right up here at the top, you will see 805 kilobytes of chip RAM and 62.2 kilobytes or megabytes of fast RAM. It is seeing the TerribleFire just fine. Now, before we do a little benchmarking, I want you to look at something. This little guy, she's hooked up S-Video right there. See that little S-Video cable? Look at the quality. Look at the, I mean, seriously, this is right up against the screen. Look at the sharpness of the S-Video on this NTSC CDTV. That is flipping gorgeous, gorgeous quality. And the other cool thing is this is an interlaced 640 by 480 screen. Do you see any flicker on there? I don't see any flicker, and that's because this TV filters out the flickering. So even though I'm in full interlace mode with nothing but an S-video cable, this thing is rock solid. It looks absolutely gorgeous. And you of course, you all know that we are legally obligated. It is literally the law that we have to run sysinfo on something like this. So let's go ahead and check out sysinfo. And utilities, sysinfo. All right, it recognizes, ECS Agnes 2 meg. Now that's interesting. It recognizes a 2 meg Agnes. This is a 8372A. How interesting. Theoretically, it is a 2 meg Agnes, I think. Oh, of course, we only have 1 meg of chip RAM in here. Standard Denise. Now I do have an ECS Denise. I may just stick in there just for laughs. 68030 CPU, 68030 MMU. Let's take a look at the memory. 64 megs of 32-bit memory, 1 megabyte of chip RAM. Let's take a look at the speed. And it's coming back pretty darn quick. 17.4 times faster than an A600, 7.57 times faster than an A1200, half the speed of an Amiga 4000. That's not too shabby. 9.62 MIPS, no megaflops, because of course we don't have an FPU in here. Let's take a look at the drive speed, which is not horrible. SDH0 speed. 3.2 megabytes per second data transfer to the interface, which is not bad. That's pretty normal for the TerribleFires. I might be able to get that number up a little bit if I make sure that I'm using the MMU to you do a little flash ROM thing. It might be able to get that number up higher. I will have to play with that. So what did we learn today? We learned that we can upgrade the custom ROMs of the CDTV to 2.3.5 and the Amiga ROMs to 3.2.2, and we can load a TerribleFire card in there and get it to actually recognize and boot, and it will still play audio discs. If you pop one in at the beginning, it'll boot to the audio disc. That's kind of cool. We also learned that the 8 megabyte expansion for the CDTV is not compatible with this setup. It's very possible that the pinouts on that little expansion header in there are conflicting with the fact that we now have a completely different CPU in the 68000 socket, and it could just be totally incompatible. It's hard to say. Probably the same reason that getting one of those 8 megabyte RAM upgrades that fit into the 68000 socket, and then you put the 68000 on top, would never work in a situation like this. Just it gets confused. But that's okay, because we've got 64 megs of RAM. Now, what problems did I discover? Well, I discovered that I'm not ever going to get the lid on this thing the way it is right now. If I took the compact flash interface off, I could probably just fit the lid off, but then I worry about the pins of the TerribleFire, the IDE pins, hitting the top of the case, and that wouldn't be pretty. I don't think that's really good for it to ground that out. And I cannot take any of the 68000 extensions off of there, the ones I have underneath the TerribleFire, because if I even take one off, then it hits the power jack and it hits one of the capacitors, and the board just doesn't fit in there. So I've got to figure out how I'm going to do this. Now, one way that I'm going to try to do it is I will try to see if the SCSI card that's in here still works fine. I haven't even tested that. And if it does, I may just boot this entire thing right from SCSI and leave that IDE header alone for now, and just put some electrical tape over there to prevent it from grounding on the top of the case, or maybe I'll put one of those styrofoam things right on the top of there to protect it from grounding on the case. Probably be just fine then. And the SCSI's, it's not bad performing. I think this IDE is faster, but the SCSI's fine. The other thing that I have to resolve is once I boot into Amiga OS, everything's working great. But the second I put a CD in there, I tried to put in this AmiNet Set 3 CD. The second that I put a CD in there while Amiga OS is running, locks the whole thing up. Whole computer, whole CDTV, totally locked up. Now, it does recognize the CD0 device. I can go in there and yeah, okay, CD0 exists. The minute I try to use it in Amiga OS, locks it up. Is it something that I have loaded in my startup sequence from my old Amiga 1200 image that's on here? Very possibly. I'm going to have to go through there and see if I've got some kind of a toppy device that's conflicting with it, that's causing an issue. I can also just boot the darn thing from floppy. I can stick an external floppy in here, boot to one of my Amiga OS 3.2 floppies, and see if it recognizes the CD. Then I'll know for sure, okay, it's a driver incompatibility, it can be fixed. Come in, past. Come in, Doug from the past. This is Doug from the far, far distant future. Don't laugh. We all dress like this in the future, and you will too. Just, this is how we look, okay? But what I wanted to say from the distant future is that after this episode was shot, I Googled the particular problem I was having and realized I need to update the firmware on my TerribleFire 536. I mean, Doug from the far future has long since upgraded the firmware, and it's working perfect now, trust me. But for you in the past, you need to upgrade your firmware on the TerribleFire 536. I'll send past Doug a link to in order for the CD-ROM to be properly recognized with Amiga OS. Without the firmware update, the SCSI drive does not work after you boot Amiga OS 3.2. This is Doug from the future, signing out. Perfectly happy with that. I didn't need to do this, but has that ever stopped me in the past from seeing how far I can push these things? No, it's never stopped me, and it never will. It's kind of cool, it's kind of neat, and I'm kind of thrilled at how high quality that S-video cable is pumping out. I mean, here's one of Eric Schwartz's pictures from a couple of years back. Absolutely flipping gorgeous over S-video. Absolutely gorgeous. So, I do it for fun. Once I resolve the issues with how I'm going to install the case top on here, which hard drive I'm going to use, how I resolve the CD recognition issue, I'll let you guys know. I'll either do a little supplemental second video or just post it on Twitter or whatnot, let you know what I discovered. Should you upgrade to this? Personal choice, really, personal choice. Getting the 2.35 ROMs is nice because it does add those enhanced features even for a bare-naked CDTV, where you can actually create bootable CDs. You don't have to rely on the Commodore file in there. Fixes a couple of bugs, things like that. It's probably worth it even if you just keep the Workbench 1.3 ROMs in there. But it's neat. You can have fun with it, and it's something new and creative we can do with our CDTVs, so why not? Huge thanks to my wonderful patrons who you see scrolling over this beautiful CDTV logo on the screen here. If you'd like to join my Patreon, pop over to patreon.com/10mark and you can become part of this illustrious group. Thanks for joining me today. I really do appreciate it. Had a lot of fun with this. I've had the parts to do this project for like 6 months, 7 months, and I just haven't had the time to do it. I'm so thankful that I have the time to get back to what I love doing. Please like and subscribe. It makes a huge difference. Please, please, please comment and let me know if you've done this to your CDTV and what issues you've had. Let me know how you've resolved getting the case to fit on and still having cool accessories inside. Did you use a little extension cable to extend things out? Did you use a real hard drive? Just let me know what your solutions were. I'd love to tinker with those. And also let me know if you've had problems looking at CDs in your Amiga OS on your CDTV. But until next time, this is Doug from 10 Minute Amiga Retrocast, signing out.